Jake Sainer, welcome to the Creative Gap podcast. It's good to have you.
Thank you so much, Carlo.
I want to get a little background about who you are, where you came from, how you got into this industry. Give us a little insight into your story a little bit.
Yeah, I started making movies a long, long time ago when I was about 10, 8 or 9 or 10. My parents, they started a cooperative family school for me and all my friends, my close friends to go to. So every year, our parents taught us all the classes, and my parents taught art, and my mom was also the programmer and the director of the school. Every year we had a unit, like a month and a half unit, where we could study whatever we wanted. And as like a 8-year-old, it was, really fun to just kind of dive into something and a little more focused and kind of just explore where our own creative desires were. I started studying animation. And my dad had this old Zenith VHS camcorder that had a 1/4 second stop motion function where it would just like roll the tape literally for a little tiny fraction of a second. So I was just obsessed, and I would just spend hours in claymation stuff, paper, moving paper on tabletops, some drawing stuff as well. But it's as like a kid who was all kind of like all over the place and a little bit hyper and a little ADD, like it was this first kind of experience of focus and being able to really just invest in something. And it's like, oh, the time flies by when I do this. Like I can just sit and do this for hours and hours on end. And yeah, so it's been a long journey for me. I think I started doing more live action stuff maybe a little bit later on, maybe in early high school, maybe late grade school, just doing stuff with my friends. I bought my first, I guess, like Sony camcorder with HD, and I guess like maybe sophomore year of high school, and that was a big upgrade for me. And yeah, I mean, that's not how I got involved in the industry per se, but that's how I got
No,
involved
that's great.
in filmmaking. Yeah.
Yes. When you decided to start doing your live action stuff, and you said high school, maybe late
Yeah.
grade school, was that when you kind of thought of this as a potential career path and like something that you could do for the rest of your life? Like, when did that start to happen for you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was either that or music. And in high school, I was playing a lot of music, and that was kind of my more consistent creative effort. But it just wasn't the same kind of thing where, like, I didn't like to practice. I play bass. I didn't like to practice. I love to play with other people, and I love the collaboration aspect of it. Um, but I didn't have that kind of just like, oh, I can just sit and do this forever and ever. And I was just also surrounded by some insanely talented musicians who, I just never felt like I was like, oh, that's my, like, I'm a shining star of music. I was always really, I loved it, but it wasn't the same as filmmaking where it's like, oh, this is something that I have a knack for.
Mm.
And
Can
so,
you
yeah,
can you
yeah.
explain a little bit more like what you felt about filmmaking specifically that you were like, oh, this is it for me. Like this is what it's supposed to feel like.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think it's just about it's about it's a creative flow, and I know that you know this, and I think that I don't know, maybe it's part of just being able to create something out of nothing. I guess music is similar, but like to have images in your head and have ideas, and then just through your own will being able to like put these images into motion quite literally. And with animation, it's specifically fascinating because it is a broken down kind of more. These are still images. Obviously, all filmmaking is comprised of still images, but with animation, it's like you're creating motion, you're creating space, you're creating time, um, out of out of static objects. I mean, and I think it's a similar concept of creating time out of edits, and creating tone out of cuts in a film, where you can make something new out of what is already around you. You can kind of shift it into something new, and you can shift it into a different energy and a different tone.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think for me, because I also did music as well, I went to
Nice.
college for a year and a half for audio engineering.
Amazing.
And a lot of people that I meet have a similar path. They started either in music or like skateboarding. It's like
Yeah.
one or the other.
The two schools of
Yeah,
filmmaking.
exactly.
No.
Similarly, though, I loved music. I loved producing, engineering, but it wasn't something that like I felt was like my calling,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. And, once I started to pursue film and specifically cinematography, and something about it, like I woke up thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it. And like when I'm doing the thing, I can't help but just like smile
Yeah.
almost, it doesn't matter how much stress I'm under, how much pressure,
Yeah.
whatever it is, it just, something about it just makes me smile,
I
and like, I think that's what made me realize that this is something, regardless of how hard it's going to be to succeed in, I think it's worth it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I still get so much joy out of it, and it's a shifting amount of joy. Like it's different now too. I think that um I find joy in it for different reasons now as well. I think that there was a time when I was like, oh, I can just make this pretty image, but I think,
Mm,
but now I'm it's a lot more about connection with people as well now, I think, and especially in the commercial space. Like I think that I've started to like, so I can be inspired by most anything, but sometimes in those commercial projects, like for me, the joy of that is really just like this problem solving thing. I mean, the imagery is still extremely inspiring, but just like this huge collaborative machine that you have to kind of navigate and do it with grace too, like
yeah,
and make it feel good. And I think as DPs we have a lot of sway over how the tone of a set feels, and I think that our smiles are very um powerful in that space as well. And I think, yeah,
I
yeah,
completely agree.
yeah,
I think our smile is powerful, but equally our outward stress is equally as powerful. Like
definitely.
how we approach a set, how we outwardly approach problem solving, how we communicate directly correlates to how the set feels. And I completely agree. I think us as DPs,
Yeah,
we have a very high standing in terms of the overall feeling of what the set feels like.
100%.
And when you first started to pursue DPing, and you started to have a bit more crew, a bit more responsibility, how was your approach to leadership in the beginning compared to say now? Like how have you adjusted and learned to become a better leader on set?
Yeah.
Because that's just as much as the job as creating a pretty image.
It really is. It definitely is. Um, I think I'm a better listener now. I think that is um, a big part of being a collaborator and also being a leader. And and I mean, being a leader in as far as your crew goes, you need to be in sync with the director. And I think that there was a time in the past where I would really attempt to push agendas of mine, not like, or visual themes or something that I was really inspired by, but and I still do that when I feel strongly about it and when I have a certainty about it, and I think it really will serve the project. But I think that I'm what is really exciting to me now is that collaboration and taking the director's inspiration and bringing it through. So I think
Mm,
listening is a big thing that I prioritize a lot more than I used to. I think trust. I think just in general, the with experience, we just begin to trust that things will work out. And I think that with time and experience, you can stay calmer under pressure, and you can give space as a leader to for things to happen with the
mm,
trust that it will that things do play out as they will and as they should, and also following the path of the things that go wrong as well is also a fun way to I don't know, to navigate, to create, because I think that often we do I'm going off topic, of course, but often
it's all good.
we do we always have something to there's always an issue, there's always a behind, there's always a shot has to get cut, there's always a renegotiation, there's and I think that understanding that these challenges are kind of little waypoints and chances to adjust and redirect and listen also to what is actually just happening on set, like not trying to force a something that we don't have time for, like listen, like, oh,
Mm,
this is we don't have time for this, we're gonna run out of light, we're gonna blah 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 blah, we have to make a split second decision, and taking those as kind of like markers and signs about how we should be approaching the project, how we
mm,
should be approaching the shoot. Like, I don't know, I think when you have collaborators who also understand who also think in that way, it's really beautiful, because we can all be like, oh, I guess that shot wasn't supposed to happen. Like, I guess
right.
that's not how we're supposed to tell this story.
Do you think that this also kind of ties into the idea of like maturity of your ego in a way?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that you I think that we can really get into the heart of creation and collaboration when we stop catering to our ego.
Mm,
It's really easy to the ego is very powerful, obviously, and it's very easy to become very attached to certain things that you think are necessary for a project, or you think that will be compelling, and that can make good work. But I think that that great work is really more about how something feels, and about following
right.
an emotion and following a path and following a flow of things. And when you can let go of your expectations, then there's a whole depth of collaboration and creation within that space. I think that is what really inspires me. I mean, that's what's really
Mm.
interesting to me.
Diving into like the collaboration aspect, I think something that I'm trying to work through myself and, develop my style in a way of, how I collaborate with a director in particular on a narrative project, not necessarily commercial. I
Hmm.
guess we'll stick to narrative for this moment. What is your process of that collaboration when you're talking about style? Because that's something that I find to be interesting. Of like, if a director has a very strong perspective that they want this film to look like,
Hmm.
how do you insert your voice without it, one, being an ego driven decision,
Hmm.
but also you want to have your voice in the film. You want to put your stamp on the film and not just be the person that, says yes to everything. Like, how
Hmm.
do you balance the pushback? How do you balance what they want to do versus what you want to do?
Yeah, I think you have to kind of find your in some way. Like you have to find the thing that sparks your mission, that kind of inspires your mission. I mean, for me, I think that I do have a very specific creative style that visual style that really inspires me often.
Mm,
But I think that if we tie ourselves too directly to visual themes and technique and like specific aesthetics, it can start to get limiting when you're starting to collaborate with people who have very specific creative voices and very specific visual styles that they're interested in exploring. Um, I think that for me, it's I feel like I've had to broaden my mission past my mission as an artist, past visual visual like tropes
Mm,
and a specific aesthetic. Even though my work always does have the me aspect of it, or hopefully does, um, I have to you like for me. I think exploring real authentic moments is something that's really inspiring to me. Finding a heart of a real situation, I think is really inspiring to me. Yeah, I mean, in short, yes, I think it's finding your in. It's finding something that inspires you within their world,
right.
and it's not. Yeah, sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes you have to dig a little deeper to connect the pieces, like to connect, yeah, their aesthetic with or their aesthetic with something deep inside you that is actually has a little spark of inspiration there.
Mm. When you said that you something that you like exploring has to do with finding like real moments, do you think that has to do with the projects that you select equally as much as how you like to find frames, how you like to find images? Can you find a correlation between the two of like, I'm given a project that might not necessarily feel like it requires real intimate moments, but my style lends to doing that. But I could also,
Hmm.
I say yes to projects because they lend to that particular feeling.
Yeah, I think people. I guess it's twofold. I mean, I do think people come to, people hire. Hopefully, I mean, but I think
Right. We
often,
all hope
yes,
that.
hopefully. But I do think often enough because I'm not. I don't know. I'm not the glitziest cinematographer out there. I don't have like people do might not hire me for the car commercial or whatever, but they
Right. The
they
L'Oreal.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But I think that people do hire me if they understand what I have to offer. I think
Mm.
they do hire me for the ability to and for the care in capturing these real moments and authenticity. Um, and then on the other side, I think that, like I was saying earlier, I think that sometimes in the commercial work, which I do love and I do a lot, like there is when there really isn't in the frame a time to put my to find that heart, in a frame, or it's just actually beside the point from what is required of the project in all ways, then the those authentic moments come on set. I mean, and then the mission becomes it becomes creating that creating that environment on set and creating a space where I can at least offer that in some way, in the space with the team, with the collaborators, and I do think that has some sort of impact on the final product. But yeah, I mean, I don't
Mm.
know. Sometimes it's very in alignment. Sometimes, yeah,
Right. I want to take a step back a little bit and kind of get a little bit of a better understanding of your path to become a DP of where you
yeah,
are now. Did you go to college? Did you go to
yeah,
film school? Is this you did?
yeah. I did. I went to NYU. Straight out of high school, went to NYU. I had 1 year at like a liberal studies program with like a guaranteed transfer into Tisch, which was
Oh,
such a
nice.
bummer at the moment because I was like, I want to go straight there. But
Right.
yeah, and it was amazing. I mean, that even having that year doing more academics was also really good for me because
Mm.
I it's like I didn't I wouldn't have had that sort of focused academic education if I was just in Tisch the whole time.
Mm.
And then I also that summer between that year and the next year, we had a class called Sight and Sound Film, which I took as a summer course, which was a 6 week intensive class with we shot an Arri S, an old 16 millimeter film camera with 100-foot daylight spools. We shot on black and white reversal film. We edited on a Steenbeck, and 6 weeks intense of that was like my actual first introduction to film school. It's like, okay, now we're
Yeah.
making
You're
movies.
doing it.
We're doing it. And we had these little crews of 4 people. Um, it was so fun. Yeah, I don't know that it's a necessary path to do film school, but it definitely it helped me a lot. And over the 4 years there, I started out wanting to be a director. Um, and then I just started shooting as well and found that was just so inspiring and also it just allowed me to create so much more than and so much more often than I would have if I was a director and having to push these projects through from beginning to end. Um, it gave me a portfolio. Um, I shot a friend of mine's, Sarah, who directed Good Girl Jane. I shot her thesis, which had Dakota Johnson was in there. I had a bunch of other little kind of fashiony shorts and stuff that I shot in school, and I cut together a good reel, and I think that's really what it provided me, aside from the technical education, which is extremely valuable, but I know that I've learned far more after
Yeah.
college than I did in college as far as technical filmmaking is concerned. And then I graduated, and I had one friend named Ramon who actually found a dance film that I did on Facebook, like randomly on his feed in like 2012 or something, while I was like a senior in college. Randomly on his feed, this dance film that I did with this like underwater stuff and this like flying thing that we like went to this like trapeze school or something for, and um, it was cool. Shot on like the 70 or something. Um, and he just reached out to me, and he was a director who already was a little bit established in New York as a fashion film director. Um, and he just started hiring me right out of
Nice.
even in my senior year. And there was one, he took me to South Africa for like a week and a half for this Jack and Jones, like it was basically a BTS video, but we like tried to make it as cool as we could, and I got like paid $2,000 for a week. I was like this is insane.
Yeah.
Like I didn't even know that I could. I don't know. I didn't even actually know that I could make money doing this. Like I actually didn't have any concept of how lucrative, potentially lucrative, being a
It could
DP
be.
was. It could be.
Mm.
And even just that little like, which is obviously a BTS photographer's rate or whatever. Like even that like was just like such a gift to be like I'm traveling. I'm getting paid, and it's
I love
yeah.
that. Did you crew it all? Did you AC, gaff? Or did you just kind of decide I'm going to pursue DPing?
I did a little bit in college, but no. And it's a blessing and a curse, honestly, because I definitely am very grateful that I've been able to get where I am by this time. There's many paths to be a DP. I it was just because I was getting offered really obviously small jobs at first, but I was getting offered jobs to shoot. So I was like, I don't
Right.
need to do that. But in retrospect, I mean, I've mainly only been on my own sets, and
Mm.
that's it, I've started to now realize like, man, I really just wish I knew how so and so did it, or I really just wish I
Right.
could just sit in on this. Like I think now with humility of age, I'm like, man, I really wish I would have just tried to get on as a camera PA on some movie, or just tried to pursue some more mentorship, or a seed for an amazing DP who, yeah, who I respected their work, and just watch them do their thing. So I think there's some
I
downsides
completely
to going
understand that.
straight into it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've had a similar path as well. I kind of AC'd a couple times. I gaffed a bit,
Uh-huh.
but I kind of I PA'd more than I did anything else. I
Uh-huh.
DP'd and PA'd simultaneously as I was like kind of coming
I
up.
love that. Yeah.
And selfish, I realized the exact same thing. I lacked the experience of working with other great DPs, but
Yeah.
that's selfishly kind of a reason why I also started this podcast is to be able to talk to DPs.
Yeah.
And, fortunately, I've been able to talk to some amazing
No, I
DPs,
know.
and
I've seen.
I've learned an insane amount just from this podcast. I think something that I struggle with, and I still do to this day, and something that people ask me all the $1 million question: how do you connect with directors? How do you connect with producers? And how do you get jobs?
Hmm.
That to me is like the one question people ask me all the time. And it's something that I don't really have an answer for. And it's something that I can do well sometimes. And sometimes I feel like I'm alone and everyone forgot about me.
I couldn't agree more. It's a wild balance. I mean, I'm I think part of the when I since because I've been shooting for so long, and since it kind of just there was some amount of momentum, and things just kind of started happening for me at a relatively young age, right after college. I I don't think I ever really developed an appropriate respect for the hustle, and an appropriate like drive in that kind of way. Um, Honestly, I think that I'm kind of re-establishing that connection within myself. I'm reestablishing my own connection to my hustle drive right now, even as a 34-year-old. Like, I think that it's really necessary. I hate it. I hate it, honestly. I mean, I don't hate
Mm.
it when it presents itself in a fluid way, but I'm not good at outreach in that way. Um the most meaningful collaborations I have are collaborations that have been built over a long, long time. Um and yeah, and it's a strange world being a DP, because I do understand what you're saying. I mean, there are times when I'm in a groove with someone, with a director for a year. There's times when I'm in a groove with a director for spanning a decade, which I love. There's times when I shoot one project with a director and I think, oh, this is going to be something really new and special, and then and then that's it, you know. And it's like you have
Yeah.
to. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of heartbreak often, I think, as in this position, and it's good as long as you just kind of maintain your center, and focus on what is inspiring to you, then that's okay. But I do understand that that feeling of being like, oh, is this like what happened to all of these
Yeah.
people I used to work with, you know?
Right.
And many of them are still around. But I mean, in short, I think that maybe I'm not the person to ask as far as the actual answer about what the best solution
Sure.
for drive is, and for outreach. I think it's just to make good work, though. I mean, I think
Mm.
that really it all just comes back down to just like on every project you have an opportunity to do something meaningful, even if it's small. and just keep doing that, and keep connected to your own creative compass, and in theory, and I think in practice for me as well, it ends up skipping steps, and you end up, if you keep coming back to what is actually meaningful to you within your work, you end up passing through a lot of, or getting passed by on even, which is also kind of perhaps a blessing in disguise, a lot of projects that don't align with you.
Mm,
And if you can keep just yourself centered in your own creative practice, then you can kind of send that message out, and there will be people who truly resonate with what you're actually doing. And the more you make it clear what it is that you do, the more that people will see that and hire you for the reasons that you want to be hired. I
I
mean,
love
I
that.
think that's the
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Do you ever feel like there was a point in your career where you felt like you were just lost in who you were as a DP? Like, what am I shooting?
Hmm.
How, how, like, I'm happy with the work that I'm doing. Like, it technically looks good, but there's just no feeling. There's no soul. There's no me in this.
Hmm.
That is something that I find fascinating and very, I think, very prominent for me right now.
Totally. I really understand that. I think, yeah, I mean, for me, it's similar to what we were just talking about. Is I think that there have been times when I've started to just go down a road of catering my aesthetic to, even to like DPs who I aspire to, or DPs who I admire. When I start kind of just like, instead of reconnecting with the core of my own creative essence, when I start to just kind of grab things from other people and like um, imitate, um, there have been times when I've been like, how did I get to over here? Like when I was making this, like, how did I get over here now? It's because, oh, maybe it was because I've just been, had some subconscious like desire to be like, to do work like
Mm,
this, to have the career like this person. Um, yeah, I think, what was the initial question again? Because I got off track.
no, it was kind of just based on the idea of like, at a particular point, did you ever feel lost in who you were as a DP?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
like, I guess to kind of elaborate a little bit more onto what I'm referring to in my head, I think it's something that I'm working through is for the past year and a half, I felt like I was a very, um, I felt almost like a tool rather than a essential collaborator in certain
Hmm.
projects where I wouldn't necessarily push to maybe put my own voice into something, maybe because I lacked the confidence in my own
Hmm.
voice and lacked what my own voice even meant in this project in particular. So I would just kind of go along with what was presented to me,
Hmm.
whether that be narrative or commercial. And I started looking at my work and realizing, like, what about this says Carlo shot this?
Yeah.
What about this says, like, oh, he has something in particular about his work? And I couldn't really, and maybe because I shot it, but I couldn't pinpoint anything about it that made me resonate with something like, oh, this is unique to him in
Hmm.
a particular way. And, you know, that could be some very subconscious thing that maybe I alone can't do, but it's just something that I feel um, and that I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out within myself.
No, I totally understand that. I think definitely, I've definitely had those periods. I think even in the last year, I think the last year with the strikes and the tumult in our industry, um, I don't even know. I guess it's a different thing of actually just like having the one of the slowest years of my
Yeah.
career. Um, and then also looking back at what I had shot in the like previous years, it's like, oh, I'm like, there is an element of you can easily get down a path of being like, oh, this is this is not me, this is, but it's also not always, also not always required. And I don't want to say that, because I think we should insert ourselves into our work in as much of an authentic way as possible. Um, but I don't think you have to be so hard on yourself, because it's not always what's asked for. It's not really you it's not always what's desired of you to do that, and to do what you want to do, you know. And I think that understanding that, especially in the commercial work, is just like, it's okay. Like, you can allow a piece
Be what it
to
is.
be what it is. And but only I think if you have an outlet to explore what it is that you want to be doing, and what it is you want to be saying. I think for me, in this past few years, I think that was directing music videos, shooting and directing, and just kind of one man banding music videos for friends of mine, musician friends of mine, and people who I really care about, and just really getting back to the really real simplicity of collaboration. And honestly, those kind of projects are some of the ones that I really do feel like are the most me. And if someone is like, "What is your work like?" I often show them little tiny things that I directed and
Yeah.
shot and edited myself, and just like crafted with a lot of care and time. And I don't know how many people actually see this work, but as long as you do have a practice of creation that that is at least allowing you to explore what is meaningful to you, I think it's
Mhm.
okay to let some of those other ones slide. And I think for me, as I was saying before, it's just like, sometimes it's about the process as well, and sometimes the the experience of being on set, and the process of creating, and also just the the navigation of a commercial set and a commercial world in that space is, it's a bizarre thing to do as an artist. Like, it's
Yeah.
not, and it's you can kind of have fun with it, because it's not the an incubator for art. It's something else, and you can kind of get into it. It's like, okay, this is a weird experiment. This is fun. It's adventurous. There's all this stuff happening, but it's not necessarily going to be my art, and it's not going to
Yeah.
it's not a place for that kind of discovery necessarily, although there's always stuff to be learned anywhere. But
Mm.
yeah,
I love that. I appreciate that.
thank you.
Um, yeah, when I I think how I came into this industry was more so in the commercial space. I didn't
Hmm.
grow up, you know, big movie buff.
Yeah,
My film history, to be honest, isn't great. I didn't go to film school,
I
but
feel the same way, honestly.
as I've grown as a DP and like gone into this industry and like really understood it, the more fire I have to pursue narrative. And I having done one feature, I think this year I did 4 or 5 shorts,
Amazing.
along with some of the commercial work. I've recognized that narrative is like really what fuels me creatively. But to pursue that and to grow in the narrative space is something that is very unknown to me. For as of this moment, I feel like I'm just shooting narrative projects, and I'm not sure how do I get to that next step in the narrative space? How do I even decide what is the right narrative project to take? Like, when I'm reading a script, when I'm presented something with the director, what are things that I should be thinking about that makes this project the right fit for me?
Hmm.
Is it budget? Is it rate? Is it the relationship with the director alone? Is it the
Hmm.
script by itself? All these different things. I don't think I really have somebody to like bounce an idea off of, like an agent in particular.
Hmm.
Like, I think these are things that I'm trying to figure out now. And like, in your experience working on narrative projects, what are some things that you look for when you want to say yes or no to a narrative project in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost is creative. It's the first, it's the director. First, it's the collaboration. It's whether that is someone and an aspect of working and a style of working and just an energy that inspires me. I mean, it's all about inspiration, because that's when the greatness starts to bubble up, is when we have that inspiration and we can feed off of each other's inspiration and inspire each other. Um, yeah, I think for me, that's really, really the priority is what that dynamic is like. And obviously, sometimes you don't know yet when you're working with a director for the first time, and in those cases, yeah, there's an amount of risk. But luckily, we have a script. Um, Equally important, maybe not equally important, but pretty much almost just as important, is just because that we generally, if it's a writer or director, which oftentimes it is these days, is um does this story resonate with me, and is it a story that I want to tell? Is it a story that
Hmm.
yeah, that I want to tell? um
How specific does something have to resonate with you to be interested in doing a project? Like how big or how small can it be when reading a script?
I mean, it can be pretty small. It's just the same kind of thing as this. It's just trying to find your way in. I mean, um and there's many ways to do that. I think that it's really about, it's a lot about intention. It's a lot about
Mhm.
the director's intention and the creator's intention. I mean, um if what they're trying to say, if they're trying to say, maybe they're not trying to say anything, and that's fine too, but the way they're presenting information, um is it human? For me, is like, is it human? Is it is it conscientious in a way? I'm not like saying politically conscious. Is it like, does it does it aim to uplift, or does it aim to open? Does it aim to show some amount of truth? Um, Even if it's the darkest
Sure.
movie, or the darkest subject matter, or does it aim to show some amount of truth? And is that what the intention of the creators are? And in that, like, for me, if that criteria is fulfilled, then I can dive in all the way, even if it's horror, which I've honestly never really shot. But like, I could, if it's aiming to actually examine um our experiences, and if there's an amount of goodness too. I think that I not to good and bad, because I don't really think in those forms, but if there's an amount of light in
Mm,
the in the tone, if there's an amount of intention towards sharing some amount of light or experience of presence, these things are all kind of shoe-ins for me, because that's my fuel. And then I take way too many things that have way too low budgets. So budget's not really my budget is not really my in my requirements. I think that I'm I'm very used to working with a lot of limitation, and
mm.
and there's something about that that, if not just doesn't scare me, it also kind of inspires me as well, to have limitation.
Love that.
Um yeah. And then there's other things, like whether there's someone has a, I mean, to get into the narrative space, I think that you're doing the right thing. I think it's again, of just keep doing work that allows you to explore those things that are inspiring to you. Um, but there's all, I mean, yeah, it's hard to, when we get into the politics of it all, because yeah, that's where it gets crazy.
Speaking of narrative, I watched Good Girl Jane the other day,
Thank
and
you.
beautiful film, man, for real.
Thank you, Carlo.
Really,
Appreciate
really
that.
well done. Um, for those that aren't familiar, Can you provide a little synopsis of what this film was and how it kind of landed on your lap?
Yeah. Um, Good Girl Jane is directed by Sarah Elizabeth Mintz, a dear friend of mine and a longtime collaborator. It's a narrative feature, um, loosely based on, inspired by her own high school experience and her own coming of age story. It follows Jane, played by Rain Spencer, who is utterly phenomenal. Um,
Absolutely, for real,
I know
phenomenal. Yeah.
she's something else. Um, Follows her experience in high school. She's a high school, maybe freshman or sophomore, and moving to a new school. Kind of had problems with bullying in her old school and was really outcast. Her own sister as well is kind of trying to make all these new friends at school, and it's a crowd that she's not really inspired by, and they're not really letting her into their circle as well. So she's pretty isolated. She meets this little group of kids who are kind of, one would consider, the bad kids, and I think that's a trope of this. A point of this film is to kind of deconstruct that sort of uh, black and white duality of how we define people. Falls in with this crowd and ends up meeting Jamie, who's older, probably early 20s, drug dealer. He's Irish. He's played by Patrick Gibson, who's also phenomenal. So they kind of fall in love. Jane becomes involved in his drug dealing ring, and it's, yeah, kind of culminates in, I don't know. I think it things kind of blow up, but it's also a love story. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's one of the things that's just like deeply connected me with this story. It is a love story. It explores complexity of a love relationship, and even when someone might call someone bad, or call someone in define a relationship as manipulative, define a relationship as abusive, there are definitely elements of this in this film and in that relationship that are being explored, but also there is some really real true tenderness to this connection. And yeah, basic summary, I
What
guess.
what was production like on this? Because I
Woo!
the whole film. I mean, just from like a cinematography perspective, handheld, 100%.
Yeah,
So you were holding a camera that whole time.
yeah.
That's a very
Um,
physical film for you.
it was a very physical film for me, and even going into it, I knew it was going to be like that. I I trained a lot for that film, and
Do you mind elaborating? Like, what do you mean by training?
I do yoga is my main. I do a
Oh,
lot of
me
yoga,
too.
and I do weights. You too?
Me too.
Nice.
Hot.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do hot yoga.
Where do you go?
My wife's currently getting her, was it 200 hours instructor course? I think
I
right
do
now
hot
she's
yoga
doing.
too. I go to
Yeah.
Moto in New York.
There's a place in New Jersey called Basque
Okay,
Hot Yoga.
cool.
Yeah, big fan.
I'm ever there. Yeah. Yeah, I do yoga. I think that the training for that film and was honestly my first like real serious investment in that physical practice, and I haven't stopped, and I've only gotten more intense about it
Mm.
in the years following. Production was wild on Good Girl Jane. We started filming, so it's a small indie project. Um, the directors Sarah and I went to college together and have been working together for a long time. So I was kind of involved in the concept of this project from the very early stages, which I'm saying like 2015, 2014,
Oh,
like
wow.
short first drafts of far iterations ago. I mean, this has been something in the works for a long time. Um,
So you have a deep understanding of this
yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah. Um, Definitely, and a strong attachment to it's our baby, you know, and it's Sarah's the director, and then Lauren Pratt, our producer, also, who used to be we used to date. So there's a whole element of a real trio of kind of just like um, a core crew of people who are very deep and strong collaborators on many levels. Um, Lauren was trying to finance this film for probably 4 or 5 years before we shot as well. So, and I was somewhat involved in all of these processes. So after all of this, and finally, I mean, it's very difficult to get an indie film made and to get people to pay for it, but we did it. After years of trying to find this financing, we started production of our 4-week shoot in March of 2020. And
Wow. What a time.
we shut down right we kind of thought it was like March 3rd is when we started, and we were like, okay, we're just kind of running in front of this snowball. um
Yeah, it's gonna catch up
we're just
eventually.
gonna catch up eventually. We thought we could finish it up then, but we shut down 2 weeks into our production for COVID.
Mm.
um Waited an entire year, and and right when it was like there were procedures in play to shoot during COVID, we started back up again. We were one of the first productions up again in LA in 2021 in March, um, which was wild. Already that was an insane way to make a movie. But honestly, that hiatus provided us with, as devastating it was and as scary as it was for everyone, obviously COVID, and also just having put so much time and energy into a project and then having it almost feel like it was taken away. It really
Did it change your perspective on the film? Or
it
not change your
changed
perspective, but change your view on how to approach it moving forward?
100%. I mean, like when I watch the film, it's like, okay, that was pre-pandemic, and that
Can
was
you
during the pandemic.
you can notice the two shifts?
It's we essentially we had the ability to make, this was all of our first feature too. So essentially we had the ability to make a first feature, and then
Congratulate, beautiful first feature.
thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Amazing.
We had the ability to make a first feature, which was the first half of a feature, our first 2 weeks. We had a year to sit with that footage, a year to look at what we were doing, a year to edit stuff together, um, and assess how we wanted to operate moving forward. So not a lot of huge big picture changes happened, but we really just kind of locked in. We doubled down on our mentality. I think we kind of reclaimed the set in a way. I think that the second time around we were just like, okay, we know what we're doing. We have an understanding of what doesn't work from what we had shot before, and we have an understanding of what really does work.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it was a totally different energy the second time around, and a different level of confidence with all of us collaborators as well. Like, I don't know, everyone grew a lot in that year on this planet. um, it's not, let alone in our film shoot. So yeah, yeah. I mean, and it was an indie budget feature. It was small from the get go. We got a little more, thankfully, post COVID to cover CCOs and all of this COVID infrastructure that we had for that brief amount of time.
How did you feel at the end of it? Because when I shot mine, I felt invigorated beyond anything that I could have ever felt shooting something. It literally was like a light bulb moment of like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like.
100% agree. I mean, it was magical, and it just a real, just such a huge collective effort, and to have and to share that experience of invigoration with so many people is so powerful. And so many people really believed in this project. I felt amazing and so accomplished, and I really, I mean, we really just all believed so strongly in this piece. I also, like, for the first half of the shoot, I had just because of all the handheld operation, We shot on the Mini LF, Alexa Mini LF with Cooke S7 lenses, and I stripped it down as much as possible, but it's still, I mean, a
That's a big one.
35 pound situation. So the first, after the first shoot, my left shoulder was totally fucked. And after the second shoot, like, and I finally got it back, like, after that, in that year of COVID, I was like, some rehab and some, like, all this stuff and some PT. And then finally, by like literally, like, right when we were starting to shoot the second part, I was like, oh, I'm great now. And then adrenaline kicked in for the entire shoot. And I was
Yeah.
just like, just going for it, operating. And then, like, literally 2 days after we wrapped, I was just like, oh, I can't lift my right arm higher than this. It was literally just like, it's just like, you did the thing. It's done. Um,
Yeah, the adrenaline wore off, and
yeah,
your body's like, all right, time to recognize what you have just
yeah.
done to me.
That actually was what inspired my real doubling down of yoga, because that
Mm,
is really my PT and my maintenance as well, and my mental clarity and everything. But I think it was just necessary for me it still is necessary for me to
yeah.
just constantly do it. I did it this morning before this
Hmm.
call at 7 a.m. Like, so yeah. Um, Exuberant after the shoot. I mean, and damaged physically.
I think something specific I wanted to, I noticed in this film is your use of coverage, and coverage in the way of like not traditional, because of how handheld it was and because of the free flowing. It was almost like you started the scene in a wide to establish the characters in a space, and then you were able to kind of push into the close-ups and mediums within almost single long takes.
Yeah.
It was like a lot of scenes were very long.
Yeah.
How was this going into it? How was that approach? And also, like, in terms of working with the actors, knowing that they also had to kind of do a long take per scene type of thing.
Yeah. Um, Sarah and I experimented with this. We did a short proof of concept in 2017, where we landed on this very specific methodology. It's really just cut as little as possible. I
Hmm.
mean, essentially the rule is, I mean, there's some minor exceptions, and there's a few montage scenes which are definitely exceptions to this editing, to the shooting style, but it's generally one shot per scene. I mean, we
Right.
kind of we really kind of gave ourselves a pretty, as hard as we could without creating insane production nightmares for us, a pretty strict rule of each scene is a oneer, basically, and it's all handheld too. It's not
Yeah.
um
Blocking is so important when you're doing that.
it's wild too, because there's a lot of scenes that are just simple dialogue scenes, and learning how to cover multiple people and whole groups of friends, and a very fluid energy that we're trying to create. But there's a lot of, I mean, Sarah and I really, we planned a lot. We had a lot. We did a
Hmm.
lot of diagrams, and we did a lot of shot listing, and a lot of that is blocking. I mean, a lot of that was just trying to figure out how to make it look like there was no efforting happening within the blocking process, when really it was a lot of complicated
Yeah.
little beats to make us be able to pull it off in one shot. Yeah, it was, as far as working with the cast. I mean, it the whole film had, it was integral to the film, I think, and I think that Sarah made this call to shoot it like this, and it's a wild and brave decision, because
Were
it
you
puts,
nervous
I was
going
nervous,
into
but I
it?
was also so excited. I mean, it was just, it aligned so well with what inspires me. It really it really clicked with me, and I was so excited, and it was just a way that I really had wanted to work, and a way that is very intuitive for me to work. Um, yeah, I mean, with the cast, it became real life. I mean, it just it we
Right.
had to, all of us had to, Sarah, me, even production, all the cast. Some of these shots are 5 minutes long. Like, there's a lot of scenes where some of the shots are 5 minutes long, including getting into a car, doing an entire driving grid all within the same shot, and then landing somewhere and finishing a scene out there. Like, it's not these some of these things are not easy resets either. Like, you
No.
have to you have to everyone
These
just
were
has
things
to
that I was thinking about too. Is
yeah.
on a practical side of things, it's insane how you guys were able to accomplish. But as a viewer, it really felt like I was watching their story and not in a film with cuts. Like I think as actors, I can't speak to it. I've never done it, but it almost had to have felt like they were in real life going through everything because they weren't like, okay, cut, we're going to do a close up now.
Yeah,
It was
none of
just
that.
real.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was really exciting for everyone. I think everyone loved to work like that. I think that it also just created an energy of of the realism energy, but also just like this just responsibility, because we all had, like,
Mm.
me as a I had to perform as well in a certain way, and
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of coverage, and then there's a lot of very specific camera blocking, and the actors all everyone just felt like everyone had to be very on. You didn't really know entirely when the camera was going to be on you or off you, and we just all had to both feel that pressure and inhabit that space, but also really it had to also feel as natural as possible. So it's also just it's embodying that responsibility, but also just like saying fuck it and let it go, and just actually
Mm.
the real priority is following intuition in those moments. And I think that's because that is, as far as Sarah's concerned, this is another thing that I learned, I think a real deep lesson that I learned, I think, on in this process was to let go of my own um construct of perfectionism, because Sarah's an
Interesting.
actor's director, and she's extremely aware of tone and presence and authenticity, and it's not about camera for her. And I mean, obviously it is in some respects, but it's not going to be the priority ever when she's choosing the select. And
Mm.
the selects are the whole scene. It's never the select isn't the line. The select is the entire
Right.
scene. And so there's many shots where moments when I had these kind of more complicated ideas of how I wanted it to feel, and oh, we should land in a close up right there. She says this and looks over there. You don't nail that in every scene, and it doesn't happen to be the scene where every actor gives their best performance. So me releasing this idea of oh, it has to be this, it's like, oh no, that doesn't matter. It has to be what feels right. It has to
Right.
be what feels real, and that is actually the the intention. It's not about me
Mm.
and my camera, it isn't.
Right. I think that's an amazing point. And you said before intuition, like going through, this long take, you might do it a couple times. How often does your intuition change per take? Like it does something that the actor does make you move the camera slightly different on this one. Like how much freedom did you have in your own intuition per take?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think there's two ways that goes. One is where you're fine tuning and you're building up into a rhythm with everyone involved. Um, and in that regard, yes, I think that every time you have another little idea, or you have another little impulse to do something, it's hard to necessarily know whether they're gonna hit the same mark,
Right.
like, exactly, and make it like actually possible for you to accomplish your new ideas. So even if you do, and that's where you have to kind of start immediately letting go of the attachment of even these little ideas that sound so inspiring to you in the moment. It's just like, okay, if they hit their mark there, then I can do this little move. But if that doesn't happen, then we just figure it out. Um, and then, but a lot of times that sort of more structured building on intuition is counterproductive, and a lot of
Mm,
times the real instinctive first take, second take are, even though it's maybe a sloppier camera
could be the right
situation,
one.
can be the right one, because it actually just has the more authentic feeling of intuition.
Right.
um yeah.
Mm. I just watched it and was amazed at this one scene in particular. And I think you included it in the Google Drive, like the behind the scenes,
Hmm.
when you were in the sunroof, maybe.
Yeah.
Like there's a scene where you're literally doing like a 360 rotation in the car,
Yeah.
handheld. And in my head, I'm like, how's this happening? Right? Like, is he sitting on the middle console?
Uh-huh.
How creative did you have to get on certain things to be able to accomplish all of these different long one takes?
Very, we had to get so creative, and it's a funny film in that regard because it's not a showy film from a cinematography I mean,
Mm-mm.
maybe it can be if you're a DP
But there are
watching it.
moments,
Yeah.
actually, like I think I remember one scene in particular where Jane and Jamie were together in the car for the first time, and then the security guard pulls up and they
Mm.
pull to the next spot, and then they get lit by this beautiful warm street lamp.
Mhm. Mhm.
Gorgeous. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, that's like
Thank you.
that's something people wouldn't necessarily like think of as like, oh, cinematically, like, but like for me, I was like, oh, that is intentional. That's gorgeous.
Thank you. That is one of my
That light.
honestly, that's one of my the scenes I'm most proud of that I honestly ever have shot. It's their first like real intimate moment together. Um
Beautiful.
they
For real.
Thank you.
It was
They
like something I consciously said to myself. Yeah.
There's also a very long scene too. It starts with them. Jamie has just had a seizure. He and a security guard is coming over to them in the parking lot and starts shining their light on them. Jane gets on Jamie's lap. He's in the driver's seat. She gets on his lap and drives the car. Actually, drives the car while sitting on his lap around the parking lot into a pre-lit lighting spot, has to hit her driving mark, like literally has to hit a mark, a very specific mark with a car while she's acting. And then and then like they kind of just look at each other and kind of tumble back into the back seat together, and that shot carries through and the entire sex scene in the back seat of this car, which is also very intense performatively. um yeah, and yeah, my gaffer James Barry had such a fun time with that lighting setup. It was one of the ones that he was just like tweaking into the last moment. Like
Yeah.
it was a big setup, honestly.
Can you?
Yeah,
I'm actually curious what that setup was. Normally, I don't even talk about. I am
no, it's all
curious
good.
though what
Um,
technically that is.
I think it was like a continuous wrap around. We had probably sky panels. Um, we had a kind of our I forget what the exact balance was, but we had our sodium vapor
Hmm.
consistent sodium vapor look throughout the film coming through soft. Lot of flags just flagging off little ambient street lights, so there wasn't a lot of double shadows and stuff like that. There was one little tube rigged to the car, and there were some other things, some other little units just to wrap it around into the back seat, just like armed out way over because yeah, I mean it didn't feel so complex, but it was a kind of a situation,
Well,
especially with all the
I think
control.
that's
Yeah.
a testament to you and like your team though to take an elaborate setup and still make it feel grounded. I think that is a huge win.
Thank you. That's a meaningful comment to me. And I think that's what I was saying before. Is it's not a flashy movie. I think that's became the priority, and we got so into it and really had all these crazy things. Like there were rickshaw step-ons and offs. There was golf cart step-ons and offs. There were all of these things that to us when we were doing it was like, wow, this is going to be so crazy. But at the end of the day, that was actually never the point. And
Mm.
I think the beauty of it is that many people don't even clock it at all. Like
No.
if the film is working, they're not thinking, oh, look at all these long oneers. It's just like, okay, it feels different than a normal
Mm.
than a typical film, I think, and I hope it feels grounded. Um,
Was lighting a priority for you in this film? Like it feels grounded and it feels real, but it also feels like a movie too, which it
Yeah,
should. It's like how, and you're doing these long oneers and you're shooting
yeah.
360. So how was your approach to lighting?
Lighting was definitely a priority, but it it couldn't we couldn't prioritize it over the structure of the
Mm,
long takes. So there are a lot of moments where where when you could have lit a close up on a reverse of someone and
hmm
relit for the reverse or relit for the wide. There was none of those tools were available. So I guess in a way, perhaps lighting suffered because there was just we just had to really let there were a lot of moments where we had to just let play. Um,
Sure.
but we did do a lot. I mean, we did a lot, especially for all of our interiors. Um, a lot of overheads, a lot of little tiny tubes and light mats rigged to ceilings, pushes through windows, um,
Yeah, no
little,
stands anywhere.
no stands anywhere, some little cues. Yeah, it's
That's
really
also very freeing for the actors too, though.
it's freeing for me too. Honestly, every time
Yeah,
I'm on a scout, I'm just like, can we not have any stands anywhere?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's never actually entirely possible. But yeah, we got creative with rigging. I mean, my grip, Steve Forbes, is very clever at rigging and very good at it. And he found all sorts of ways to put stuff everywhere.
D-grips are so underrated, man.
I
They
know,
are the
I know,
backbone to
for real.
everything.
um, Oh, the car shot. I can talk briefly about the car shot. The the almost 360 inside the other car. Um, yeah. So for that shot where they're all five kids in the car, um, three kids in the back seat, one in the driver's seat, and one in the passenger seat. Um, there was nowhere for me to be. Our solution was to put the car in a process trailer and do I guess a poor man's Chivo rig
Right.
from Children of Men,
That's
which
kind of
is
what I thought of
it's
when I was
yeah
watching it. Yeah.
great inspiration for this, which is just me. We had a truss built over our car in the on the process trailer that was basically just suspending an easy rig line down through the sunroof and also harnessing me to literally to the windshield of the car. I was strapped onto the windshield and I had my hands down into the sunroof of the car and was just operating with just my little hand sticking down there. And it was honestly the most freeing way to shoot car footage. We actually used that rig for quite a few other scenes in that one day of shooting, where we just wanted a little more flexibility and how to get that coverage. It
Love
was a
that.
fun one. Yeah.
I also want to, the last thing I want to kind of add on this is just the fact that, you got in one Tribeca.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I
That's
mean,
crazy.
such a blessing, honestly.
Yeah, man.
The Tribeca has taken such good care of this film and really championed Sarah and Sarah's work. It was we finished shooting in 2021. um, we didn't get into Sundance, which was I had definitely been Sarah's dream, but honestly, I think with the care that Tribeca has put in, it's really a blessing. Even though Sarah did take the script to the Sundance lab, um, and yeah, Tribeca took it. It gave us such a beautiful premiere. We won Best U.S. Narrative, and
That is so cool.
yeah, and Rain won Best Performance, which is so
Wow.
deserved. I mean, she's phenomenal. And then they actually, uh, then we were trying to get a sale for 2 more years until this year, and Tribeca just started their own distribution company called Tribeca Films, and we were part of their inaugural opening slate. um, yeah, and so that's how we got it out, and now it's out there on demand and also on Blu-ray, which is freaking
Sweet.
wild.
I saw it's on Apple TV Plus, I
Yeah, yeah,
believe, right?
yeah, and you can rent it on
Amazing.
Amazon too. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
What was one thing going into this project that you didn't know about, and then when you ended it, you learned? something new? Maybe about yourself, about communication, about create anything that
Hmm.
you could think of, something that you didn't know going into it that you ended up learning about coming out of it.
I think I'm going to kind of reiterate what I was talking about before. I think one of the biggest things that I learned from this process was, it's also relates to our ego conversation earlier, I think, is just relinquishing control and just kind of surrendering to a vision. And
Mm,
it's a vision of the director, and it also is a vision that that kind of ripples through all of production. And um yeah, letting go of my perfectionism, and but also it's not actually letting go of my perfectionism. It's really just reframing what I view as perfect, and kind of not necessarily being tied to things looking a certain specific sort of way, but really actually prioritizing the way that they feel, and the way that the film feels. And it's liberating, honestly, because it can be really. I mean,
yeah.
I still am a perfectionist, and but it's just a different type. I think, like, it's a less visually oriented, less technically oriented, and more of just
Yes.
like, how do I support um creating moments that that feel the way we want them to feel. And especially on this film, like, because there's no cuts in any scene except for these montages, like, the and I think this is all true for all of movies, but very much highlighted in this process was, because there's no cuts, there's the tone of the set, and the tone of the environment we're working in becomes the tone of the film. Like,
Mm,
because editing is such a huge tool in crafting tone, and crafting an energy of a film, and deciding what you deliver to an audience. But we didn't have we 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 chose not to use that tool, which is pretty crazy. And it also made me appreciate the tool of editing a lot more, because
yeah.
I see how you can adjust, and how you can build something new out of something. But this was very much, there was not a lot of building something new out of our footage. It was we really had to make sure it felt the way we wanted it to feel in the film on the day. Um, so I think it taught me to prioritize the, the environment as well, the environment on set, and the creative
Mm,
space that we're building as a team is especially in this film, but always is the actual construction of the base energy of what you're delivering to an audience. Um, and then with editing, of course, you can adjust, and you can kind of massage it into something else, or something more powerful. But in but the end of the day, you really are documenting, you're capturing a happening. I mean, this should seem so obvious, but I don't know that it always is. It's like you're capturing a happening in a real space with real people, and everyone is involved. Like, it's not just the directors and the actors, and the production and the producers are catering to a tone of an experience. And I think just understanding the power and the responsibility of building a beautiful space on set. I think that
I love
is,
that.
yeah, one of
Amazing.
the greatest things I learned here.
Amazing. Last question.
Yeah.
You where you are today, sitting
Hmm.
across from that high school, maybe version of you who decided to start pursuing film, what advice would you give that younger version of you?
My advice would be to just don't stop the childlike creation. I think when I was a kid, I was I was raised in a very communal setting. I was raised by artists. I like there was this need to be drawing or animating something or playing some music or creation, like even just very tactile creation was a huge part of my life. And I think as we all grow older, we sort of drift away from those habits. But like I think there was a long time, and I feel like I'm really trying to reconnect with my just instantaneous like urge to create, like my just having a lump of clay in my hand or whatever, like or like
Yeah.
Sculpey or something. Like like it's we need to exercise our creativity in as a muscle and as like as a power that we have. Like we need to enforce this power, and we need to like let we need to leave room for it to kind of bloom and grow as it does
Mm.
organically. And filmmaking, as much as I love it more than anything, it's not it's cost prohibitive and it's time prohibitive. There's so many mental barriers um, to go through in order to get to the point where you are creating, and and we can't just wait until the green light or until the shoot day or until the take to start to turn on the creative energy. Like we need to it needs to be there in the background all the time. And I think that it takes practice. So I think that my advice is to keep creating in all the ways, and don't give up all the little practices of casual creation that that we might have when we're younger, and keep that spirit, because you're gonna need that energy, you know. And
Beautiful.
filmmaking can be daunting. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, man. Really
Thank you so
appreciate your
much,
time
Carlo.
today.
I appreciate you.
Where can people find you?
I'm JP Sainer on Instagram, and my website is jakesainer.com. Yeah.
Amazing. All right.
Thank you.
Everyone go check out Good Girl Jane, available on Apple TV Plus. Anywhere else? Can
Amazon
they
to
find
rent.
it?
Yeah.
Amazon to rent. Definitely go check it out. It is worth the watch for sure.
Thank you so
Hopefully you
much,
enjoyed
Carlo.
today's episode. I'll see you next time. Peace out.